I'm not sick or struck dumb, or don't you know a kick when you see one can't quit? We're not done, we're gonna kick till the next one.
What's that old joke? A woman walks into a bar full of character actors, so many that they're practically crawling on the walls. "Have a drink with me," one of them says to her immediately. "I look the most like Peter Fonda." No thanks, she says. "Pay no attention to him," another guy says. "I look the most like Marlon Brando. In fact, I modeled this performance on him." "Whatever," she says. "Go tell it to your mysteriously withdrawn wife." Finally, the smoke clears. She lays eyes on a third guy. He's tall, but his hair makes him even taller. His arms are suspiciously tan for someone who wears a jacket all day and lives in suburban Chicago. But they lock eyes. He saunters over. "Who are you supposed to be?" she says. "Elvis?" He pauses. "Well, actually, yeah." And they ride away together and have a balanced relationship based on mutual trust and admiration. The end. Welcome one and all to The Kick, a theme-scheming, engine-revving podcast on the Now Plan Network. I am your host, Chance Solom Pfeiffer, and today we have arrived at the conclusion of our Motorcycle Rebel Kick. In this series, we've leapfrogged through 70 years of these movies, from The Wild One to Easy Rider to Rumblefish to Ghost Rider, many of them in conversation with each other, although notably none of the other films seem to want to talk to Ghost Rider. But today, our contemporary film is hugely interested in continuing this conversation. The Bikeriders, released just a week ago, wants to know, what place does this motorcycle rebel still have in 2024 moviegoing, and how do we reflect on the gravity of these characters? The Bikeriders is written and directed by Jeff Nichols, who you would know from films like Midnight Special, Take Shelter, Mud, and Loving. It is an adaptation of a photojournalism collection with the same title. It's by acclaimed photojournalist Danny Lyon, who briefly joined this gang. And the movie focuses on the origin, heydays, and last days of a fictional gang called the Vandals. In real life, I think it's the Outlaws. But they're shown here tearing up the Chicago suburbs from 1965 to 1973. Movie stars Tom Hardy as Johnny, the leader of the Vandals. Jodie Comer as Kathy, who is retelling the history of the gang to a journalist, with a notable focus on her long-term boyfriend, Benny, played by Austin Butler. He is the Vandals' freest spirit and the prince in waiting, if Johnny gets his way. But now, let's dig into it. We got ourselves a Motorcycle Rebel picture in 2024. Returning to the show, it is film critic Bennett Campbell Ferguson. Ben, hello.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chance.
I'm thinking of starting a riding club.
Why? All those clubs do is sit around talking about motorcycles.
That's what we do.
You don't belong nowhere else, so we belong together.
But you're the man in charge.
I'm Johnny. We're the Vandals.
I'm Benny. I like you guys.
Your boyfriends are getting into trouble.
Shit.
What the hell were you thinking back there?
Nothing. I saw you squaring off with them guys. What do I need to think for?
Yeah, you and me, kid.
The trailer for this movie is quite a bit different, as happens, from what we end up getting. Like, I went to Furiosa the night after I saw it, and they were still playing the trailer, and I was like, oh, this trailer makes it look like the Bikeriders is kind of a, rise and fall story about, like, Tom Hardy, like, taking the gang way too far and getting angry and ruining this gang, and Austin Butler, like, finally having to stand up, which is not at all what the movie is, I don't think.
No, I don't think so. And that was one thing that really fascinated me, that for one thing, Austin Butler is not in this movie nearly as much as the trailer makes it look like.
Right.
And I almost wonder if there was a idea of, oh, we cast a big, hot young name in a small role and use that to help sell the movie, so it's not just like, oh, come see Tom Hardy and Jodie Comer do more weird voices.
Yeah, we gotta talk voices. And because of the book inspiration, I think it's sort of necessarily focused on iconography. So what do we think the Bikeriders has to say about like this genre of movie, Ben? What's it adding to the conversation in 2024?
I think what it's adding to the conversation is crossing it with another subgenre, essentially, because of course there's the iconic subgenre of Die Hard on a blank, but the other one I think is like that is Goodfellas with blank. And
Sure.
we've seen Goodfellas with stockbrokers. We've seen Goodfellas with movies. We've seen Goodfellas with now motorcycles. And I think in addition to being so focused on iconography, this is definitely a more tightly structured film than I would expect from Jeff Nichols. Even the framing device of Jodie Comer being interviewed throughout, and the idea that there is a character who is explaining these things, and in a sense explaining the iconography, I feel like the Jeff Nichols of some of the other films he's done would let us just sort of bask in the iconography. And this is definitely a more anthropological approach of not only will I have a journalist who is investigating it in a very specific way, but there will be someone whose main function really in the movie is just to explain things to said journalists.
I don't want you riding. Yeah, it scares me, especially this soon after surgery. I don't like it.
You don't like
Oh, I get worried.
Yeah. Jodie Comer is essentially the would-be Karen Hill of this movie, if we're keeping up the Goodfellas comparison. That's the Lorraine Bracco character in Goodfellas. And I've always and I think that she almost says, there's almost like a direct Karen Hill line where somebody does something violent and she's just like, I don't know. If I'm honest, I found it exciting. Which is, I think, something that Kathy almost explicitly says. And that becomes an interesting character to analyze, too, because she is really, like, invested. You have to wonder, like, what made this character, who is still an outsider in the gang, what makes her so interested in being, like, the amateur historian of the, like, she can't wait to talk to Mike Feist about, like, the story of how it started and how it got bad, and what they all used to do, while never really feeling like a total sense of belonging.
Yeah,
which makes her an interesting sort of character. I have an idea for what the thesis of this movie is, Ben, but I'm curious if you have one. Like, if you think this movie is like trying to say one thing, maybe with its Goodfellas homage, what do you think it's going for?
I think there's something interesting going on about the naivete of these characters, and that, like, Tom Hardy seems so tough and hardcore and
Yeah.
dangerous and violent, and yet by the end of the movie he's like, oh, these new guys, I can't control them. And as frightening as this motorcycle club may be to the bystanders, we see the firefighters letting the bar, burn because they're afraid of these guys. Most of them actually are not that scary. They're actually
100%.
just these dumb kids are like, oh yeah, let's go to a picnic with our motorcycles, family, it's nice.
Yeah, and you say dumb kids, it's almost like dumb dads. I feel like
that's true, yeah.
age is a really interesting special effect in this movie, because you kind of get in there and you see all these guys and you're like, look at all these, like, hot, cool, scruffy, weird young guys. And then when the younger guys start to show up, you're like, oh no, like, most of these guys are in their 40s and have, like, kids at home that they're ignoring, and are not prepared at all for, like, a scrappier, more alienated generation of dudes to join up.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like, Michael Shannon is in this, and in my opinion gives the best performance in the movie. And if you compare him to, like, earlier Jeff Nichols films, he looked like a baby in those, and in this he really looks like a dad, kind of gone to seed, mumbling about communists or whatever.
That's not like a deconstruction of masculinity necessarily, but it has like a watchful eye on it. And I think that it observes that like most of these guys just want to belong to something, so they have something to talk about. Like you made too many rules for your friend group, and now it's like not cool to sit around and get trashed in a field anymore because things get out of hand.
Well, Tom Hardy even says something to that effect, and I'm going to butcher his, very interesting voice, but it's like you give everything to something, it's still going to go the way it goes, or whatever the line is.
Honestly, I think you're attempting more of a Chicago affect than he does. I think he decided long ago that when he did American Roles, it was going to be a Brooklyn accent, and it still very much is here. I think the number of times he goes, yeah, like he just says it like he's just doing Pacino and Brando. Yeah, that's like this little tick that he's stuck on. I love the Tom Hardy moment, by the way, there's like a house party that gets dark like 75% of the way into the movie, and I maybe it's Johnny's house, I don't know, but like wherever he goes, he's the host of the party, and there's a guy like shooting heroin in the back, and instead of you kind of think maybe for a second he'll be like, no, we don't do that in the Vandals or whatever, but instead he just like kind of gives this look of like, oh God, like what, this party I'm throwing, like, is it even fun anymore? And then he just kind of meanders away to deal with some other horrific act of violence he partially inspired.
Johnny always loved Benny.
This is our family. Forever.
Hey! Told you to take that jacket off.
You'd have to kill me to get this jacket off.
The detractors have accused it of being cosplay. The word cosplay is getting thrown around a lot. I've seen that thrown around by a couple people. What do you think? Yay? Nay?
I think, and I will say that there are a lot of things I admire about this film, but I do think that's a very fair criticism. And not to keep harping on the Michael Shannon character, but the reason I think that character is so effective is it's just Michael Shannon being Michael Shannon. He's not trying to play some kind of idea of a character. And a lot of the performances I looked at and I just wished they would loosen up. Watching Tom Hardy, even though I actually thought it was a fine performance, but I got very nostalgic for the days of Inception, where he could just be a character who was kind of charming and elegant and in a normal way and just talked like Tom Hardy. And now it feels like every role he does, there has to be some kind of high concept transformation to show what a good actor he is.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it because I love Jodie Comer in The Last Duel. If I ran the Academy, I would have given her the Oscar for that.
So good in that movie.
So good. I think she's terrible in this movie. I think it felt like she was playing a cartoon character, honestly. And I think part of that's the script, honestly. But imagine if you had a slightly more real performance, or frankly, an American actor who wasn't, having to kind of, transform themselves in some over-the-top way to be this character. I think that's where the cosplay accusations probably come from.
I think that's probably true. I think I was okay with her performance a little more than you, but yeah, like there's no doubt that from the moment you hear her like try to be a Chicago woman, a very like it's in that sort of like Fargo season 5 zone where she's just like, so I went to this bar and there were all these guys, and it's just like, oh my God, am I going to be able to get past this voice at all? And I really do think it is sort of like her zest for telling the story that helped me forget about it a little bit. But then you do kind of run into that thing of like, what was I supposed to take away from that character? That she was delusional? That she was so into this because she couldn't really be a part of it? Like, I'm not sure there was enough depth to that character to help you forget that she was really doing a voice.
Yeah, because she's not a character. She's a device. She's there to explain things that honestly I don't think need to be explained. And I don't hate voiceover, by any means. It's like a tool and it can be used effectively or not. But I think in this case, it would have been better for us to just sort of be in this world. And also to go with the Goodfellas thing, I think that's why Ray Liotta's voiceover in that movie is so great, because Ray Liotta is not an observer. He is fully a part of that world and conveying what he's feeling. So it's not just like, oh, I'm telling you how it is. It's I'm telling you what I'm experiencing. And it feels like she's telling us what other people are experiencing. And part of the reason I have a hard time understanding her character is Austin Butler is just so uncharismatic in this. Like, I get he's hot, but I don't understand why anyone would be so seduced by him that's like, oh, you just married him in a week? Like, he's a lunk. He's just kind of like standing around and mumbling about how he wants to ride. And I know he's not there for me. I'm not the target demographic for him. But even so, I don't get it.
It's having some fun with the iconography he's bringing to the table, like when he kind of like leans into her for the first time and on his arm it says Benny, like a name tag, and it's just like glistening right as he says I'm Benny, which is like a funny bit. And then I do like him waiting outside her house just like chain smoking for who knows 18 hours waiting for her to come out, and then like when the boyfriend finally leaves and is like, I'm out of here forever, he kind of like wipes the sleep out of his eye and he's just like, oh Jesus, that actually did take a long time. And then he kind of saunters toward the house. So I think he has nice little moments like that when the movie is sort of asking him to play around with the fact that he is James Dean or Brando or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, once he actually like has to have a fight with his wife about the way he wants to live, in no way is that character grounded enough to make that conversation interesting. And maybe that is also sort of part of the point, is just like Johnny says to Benny, like, you should lead this gang because you're the guy that all these other people actually want to be, the guy who is sort of actually barely wants to be part of this at all because it's constricting, because he doesn't like to be around rules. But I feel like that's complicated. The sort of unknowability messaging there is complicated by the fact that they all kind of do think they know him. They're like, oh, he's the guy to whom the road means everything. And he really does care about this gang. You'd have to kill him to get this jacket off of him. When in actuality, the real people who you have no idea what the hell happened to them or what's going on with them are like Michael Shannon, that character who just like disappears to work on a shrimp boat.
Yeah, and creating these sorts of unknowable characters. Certain actors can do that and certain actors can't. And I think it's a very, very specialized skill. Like, Ryan Gosling is a guy who can just stand there doing and saying nothing, and I'll just be fascinated by his face.
Yeah.
Robert Pattinson, who I think is an extraordinarily talented actor, he's not that guy. I can't be fascinated by him when he's just staring into the distance. So I have to see him doing or saying something, because he can't make stillness interesting for me. And I don't think Austin Butler can either, necessarily. Like, I actually felt a little bit nostalgic for Fade Rotha in this. Even though that was kind of a gimmicky performance.
Right.
It's like, okay, but when he has to play a kind of weirdo, sadistic villain, forces him to rise to the occasion a little bit and just try a little harder and not just kind of, yeah, I'm Austin Butler, smoldering hair.
Yeah. I kind of got out of my Elvis voice, but not really.
It
So let's
takes
play.
years of long deprogramming.
Do you see the thing, the Onion thing that was like, after starring in Bikeriders, Austin Butler can't stop making motorcycle revving sounds.
Yes.
So let's play a game, and we can talk about this with people we've already talked about. But maybe we can get into some other, because this movie has a deep bench of. I was kind of making fun of that scene in the opening, but the very Goodfellas-esque scene where the camera kind of swims into the biker bar. And it's just like, oh my God, this guy isn't going to be here. Oh my God, this guy is also in this movie. Is like such a, to me, was an electric feeling. Let's play a game called Too Much, Too Little, Just Right, about the dozens of performances that are in this movie. So who's doing too much? You got to go Comer, or you got someone else you want to shout out?
I hate to keep picking on her, but I got to go Comer. Yeah, she takes the cake in that category.
I think probably so.
I still think she's wonderful, but everyone has to jump the shark occasionally.
That's true. So is too little then Austin Butler for you?
I think
like
so.
He's just standing there pretending that it's something, but it's not.
I kind of think so. Yeah.
And then who besides Michael Shannon really hit for you? Because there's a lot of other interesting supporting performances in this movie, I think. Anyone you'd shout out?
Oh gosh, the guy who played Brucey was good. I don't know.
Damon Harriman. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
He is the. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought him up, because he is like also. He's an Australian actor. Who had the ignominious honor of playing Charles Manson in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and then he again played Charles Manson in the David Fincher Mindhunter show. So,
he's that guy. Oh my gosh.
He's that guy. But he actually, to me, felt like one of these, a Midwestern dude that I kind of recognized. With like he's trying to do a pompadour, but it's kind of receding, because again, legitimately, he's like old. He's got this kind of like weird little blue tiny mechanic shirt that like doesn't really fit him all that well, and I like he occupies an interesting place in the movie of like being the kind of social lubricant Brucey that like kept all these guys like having a good time, and once he's gone, once that sort of natural vibey feeling that he brought to the movie is gone, like that's when things start to get rough. And he also just has some like really good moments where you realize like Norman Reedus like plays some California biker who comes out, and you realize that he's like there to maybe hurt Boyd Holbrook because of some old California biker beef they had, and there's just like this pregnant silence, and Damon Harriman's just like, so are you gonna fuck him up? Is that gonna happen tonight? And then they all have like a great laugh. It's a good moment.
It's a great moment, and I think it's some of the best acting in the movie. And I thought Norman Reedus was wonderful as well. And I love the idea that yes, these guys are dangerous, but in that moment, the possibility of violence is almost casually batted aside, and that kind of spoke to the sort of endearing childlike quality of these middle-aged biker gangster dudes.
Yes.
And there's something kind of lovely about that.
Totally. And I mean, one of the most striking moments in the movie too is at the end when I think it's Carl Glossman and Bo Knapp's characters are just like in the car after the shit has gone down, and literally like, what do we do now? And it's just like these two, that's where the movie might like harmonize a little bit with people's cosplay accusations. It's like, these are just two guys in black coats. They don't know what the fuck to do now. Like they've just been playing dress up for 10 years. I really like that.
That's a good point though, because that's where the cosplay element actually is an effective thing, because these guys, they're really starting to look old by the end, and they look so almost comically vulnerable staring at someone who's actually threatening. And I really cared about them in the moment. I was like sitting there
So
going,
scared
oh,
for
please
them.
God, don't shoot them. Like,
They don't
like,
know what they're doing.
yeah.
I love the detail that they brought they drove their cars to the biker showdown because it was too cold, and like that's where you
Yes.
such a great that I assume that must be from Danny Lyon's book. It's almost too good to be not from real life, but like that's the ultimate, like, you know, you brought a knife to a gunfight, you brought you brought your cars to the biker thing because it was too cold. You guys are fucking washed.
I found that so relatable and so human. It's like, yeah, you get to a certain age where you want to be comfortable, even if you're going to the Rumble.
I mean, like, Johnny will do the fight, but like we'll just be in here kind of, you know, blowing on our hands. Can I? So here's the thing. I feel like, is it fair to say that you're where you at on this movie, Ben? Are you mixed? Are you mixed negative? Are you mixed positive? Can I get a clearer beat?
Mixed negative, and credit where credit is due. I got more into it when it went along. I think, especially when you're seeing the dream end for these guys, that I actually found that to be quite moving and interesting. And that's when it felt like some of the artifice was going away, and Nichols was just telling the story. And pun intended, we were taking a ride with these guys that ends in a way that is pretty depressing, but also very honest, I think.
Yeah. I think I skew more mixed positive, but I feel like there's a tension if we can zoom out. I feel like Nichols is at his best, and he likes to work inside out when he's making a movie. I mean, I think that's why he loves actors so much and they love him. Like, just guys chatting in a field. And I heard him say that, like, you know, they would send cuts of the movie to Focus Features or whatever, and the studio would be like, hey, can we cut Boyd Holbrook, like, talking about choppers? Like, does the 10th person in here really need to be talking about this? And he was kind of like, yeah, he does, actually. This is like a genuine, like, ensemble, observant, you know, almost a different shade of Dazed and Confused kind of movie when they're out there just like trashed in some Illinois field somewhere. And then I don't know if like that inside out style of observation sits super well next to like how outside in the movie is working from. When you have the journalistic framework, when you have the fact that like Johnny is literally inspired by the Wild One to create this gang. When you have the fact that Austin Butler is like trying to embody every motorcycle hero you've ever seen in a movie. It's like dabbling with like lots of outside forces, but it's at its most comfortable when it's hanging out with like dudes 6 through 10.
And I would argue with the exception of Citizen Kane, if you have a subplot about a journalist asking people questions, even though I'm a journalist, I have to say, for the sake of the movie, cut that shit immediately. Like, I mean, it's the exact same Life of Pi problem. Like, I guarantee you, if you cut everything in Life of Pi that's not on the boat, that movie would be a masterpiece.
You're taking Irfan Khan out of the movie. You can't do that to me.
I love him, and it's not his fault that the writing of those scenes is terrible and that Rafe Spall is terrible. But I think the Bikeriders is kind of the same thing. Like, if you just let us sort of hang out in this world more, I think you would have a better movie.
The Goodfellas comp is interesting too, of like why does this not succeed in going full Goodfellas? And by going full Goodfellas, I know that's like I'm talking about one of the greatest movies ever made. But like Jeff Nichols doesn't want to move the camera like that. He wants to like stand still and hang out. And I think there's a reason that like I think the costuming in this movie is amazing. I think all the guys look great, but I think that he's kind of hoping that some of those real 3-dimensional choices just kind of like sit there in an interesting way. And they do. But I don't know if I don't know if he's into the other. Well, you said you just watched Mud and really liked it.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there are dynamics of that movie that you see or don't see here?
I think the thing I really like about Mud, and I can't, speak to any firsthand experience with this, but you just feel like those characters that he's portraying, there's this instant feeling of this is how real people live their lives. This is how they talk to each other. This is how they negotiate with each other. This is how they, find power or lose it. And it just felt so natural to me. And there are these moments in the movie, like Ty Sheridan seeing Reese Witherspoon with the other guy in the bar, and he's built up this big romantic vision about her and Matthew McConaughey, and him seeing her with another guy, just you see the change on Ty Sheridan's face instantly. It's the loss of innocence, the tarnishing of some very like youthful idea of love, and that didn't feel like it was about iconography. It didn't feel like it was about movies. It felt like it was just about people living their lives, going through really basic human things. And I think I could say the same thing about everything that does work in the Bikeriders.
So maybe coming back to this idea one last time of like thinking about what this series was. These movies, like, they all have a weird relationship to like this archetype that gets worshipped of just like this guy in this jacket who doesn't want to live by society's rules. And the questions that are come about are like, so what does he want? Can you actually get to know him? Is he someone that you'd want leading? Would you want to follow him anywhere? And I think that even The Wild One, the movie that like births this archetype, has no idea how to answer that question. But it has Marlon Brando looking amazing. Easy Rider, I think maybe in a way kind of almost lucks into answering that question by being like, these guys are trying to do something and America is going to squash it. And then like Rumblefish is might be my favorite movie that we covered in this one, because it has that thing of like, basically the scene you just described, a teenage boy looking at a figment of an older man that he like has idolized, and coming to grips with the fact, or refusing to come to grips with the fact that like, you don't know that guy. You actually have no idea what's going on with him. And that sounds more like the scene in Mud. And I think that this movie, after all is said and done, like maybe does some like fun demystifying the fact that they are kind of like overgrown, boys with receding hairlines and wrinkles is like kind of fun. But as far as like making a final comment on like, who are these biker guys and like, why do we look up to them? I don't know. Maybe a little scattershot.
I think that's fair. And I think there is something to be said too about the idea that even though the movie is deconstructing that iconic image, the characters can never really let go of it. And when Austin Butler is sitting there at the end kind of gazing wistfully into the distance and hearing the roar of motorcycles, I feel like that's the Goodfellas I get to live the rest of my life as a schnook moment. Like, and when Jodie Comer says he's happy, you can tell that she's lying to herself. And it's very sad, very poignant, this idea that to these guys, even if the dream went sour when it was good, that was probably the highlight of their lives. And even if it's demystified for the audience, I don't know if it's ever really demystified for them.
Yeah, it's almost like, I almost compare it to like college or something. Like it's just a time, it's like a bunch of people who are like, you remember when it was so fun when we used to hang out? Like whatever happened to that? It was just like, well, it couldn't stay. It wasn't like some grand plot of, that's why I think it's interesting that they keep being like, these new guys, these Vietnam guys, the shit they've seen, they're no fun to hang out with. Where I don't know if I totally buy the argument that like the forces of degrading America conspired to like ruin their hangout. I just think they just weren't ready for it. And they didn't know what they had. They didn't know what they were building. It was kind of slapdash to begin with, and then 4 years later they graduated from college and they had to leave. That's it. And if some of them died, I'm sorry, guys.
I like the way you put that, the like forces conspiring to ruin their hangout, because I think that's how those characters feel. Like in their mind, it's sort of like, how dare the world ruin our biker picnics, you know?
Yeah. But then I also I'm like looking back on, is the movie maybe trying to say that like for white guys in the suburbs in like the early 60s, like it was actually pretty fucking easy to feel like you fit in?
I mean, I think that's an interesting point, and I hadn't really considered that. But when you look at it that way, you could say that that's sort of what the whole movie is about, maybe.
We spend an interesting amount of time getting to know the Toby Wallace, who gives this really interesting performance in the that Julia Garner movie, Royal Hotel, that kind of Australian outback thriller. But he plays the kid in this movie who like tries to join the gang, and Johnny's like, no. Or he like tests him and he fails the test and he's like, no. But we spent an interesting amount of time with him just being like, this kid like lives in tenement housing with like his abusive parents. And you compare that to like these other guys seem to have like basically like a middle class existence, essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah, when they're like, these new kids are animals, like they don't know the rules. It's sort of like, maybe you guys don't know how easy you had it when you made this club. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, they keep making such a big deal about how Johnny is a truck driver. So they're clearly calling to the attention to the idea that it is a little bit for show. I mean, yes, he does break people's fingers, but aside from that, he's just kind of a normal guy. Aside from that one little detail.
Yeah.
Oh, and the arson, that's a thing as well. But.
That too. We should shout out Will Oldham of Old Joy fame for being the barkeep in that scene.
Oh, that was him.
Yeah, I did not recognize him in the moment either. I was just like,
That's
when I
cool.
was like, who are the 20 character actors who are in this? And I was like, Will Oldham. All right, Ben. It's truth or trivia time. Unless do you have any other points you're dying to make about the Bikeriders?
No, I think that pretty much covered it. Yeah.
Would it be better if it had a better title? My friend Dan, when I told him, was just like, the Bikeriders. Does like an 8-year-old name that? Like what? People who ride bikes? Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, as someone who rides a motorized bike, when I think of, bike rider, I think, just pedaling around. I don't think of roaring around on a chopper. So
that's right.
The title is a little bit like, what is this, a sequel to that movie Premium Rush where Joseph Gordon-Levitt's a bike messenger?
That's right. Good Premium Rush reference.
Oh, Michael Shannon, by the way.
Is he the bad guy?
He's the bad guy.
Incredible. All right, boss. Truth or trivia? What do you want to do?
Truth.
You played right into it. You're known for riding your bike across Portland quite capably.
Thank you.
Have you ever been on a motorcycle?
No, never.
How long do you think you could stay upright on a motorcycle before you got into a horrible accident?
Less than 0 seconds.
Like when you take your foot off the ground and try to rev it, that's when it tips over.
That would be the point at which I would die.
All right. Can I ask you to do a trivia?
Of course, yeah.
Tom Hardy's played many gangsters over the course of his career.
Yeah.
Can you name us 3 Tom Hardy gangster movies?
Oh, okay. So Legend, definitely.
Beautiful. And that does not count as 2. I know what you're thinking.
That's
one film.
Yep. Isn't he a gangster in The Drop?
Very good.
Is Bronson, is he in prison because he's a gangster? I've never seen it, so
I think he's in prison because he violated some mustache laws, I think is the...
Oh, okay, well, yeah, okay, yeah. No, not gangster territory.
I actually don't know. I've never seen Bronson either. He could be.
Oh, is Lawless, is he a gangster in that?
Absolutely. Lawless. That's a Hillcoat jam?
Right.
Maybe?
Yeah.
That's not a good film. Lawless is not great. Do you like Legend? Do you find that to be like a little too much goofing around as well, performance-wise?
I was in a hotel once and I caught like some of it on TV, and I thought what I saw looked pretty fun. So I'll have to watch the whole thing someday.
I almost wonder if maybe in Legend he's given himself to it so fully that he might have like used up and or shown us like all of his moves at that point, because you have him like playing the Cray brothers, and they're constantly like doing that thing of like shuffling up to someone and threatening them, and you never know if they're actually going to punch or if they're going to like say something like sort of off-putting and then like back away. And because he does that for the runtime of an entire film playing 2 different guys, he might have kind of emptied the quiver a little bit, to the point where when you get here, unless you're going to like be Marlon Brando or something, or again, like play more with that shtick and watch him put it on and take it off, he might be out of moves.
Yeah, I don't really know where he goes as a performer at this point. And maybe that's why, Christopher Nolan is so keen to limit him by making him wear various masks in these movies, because it forces him to be very, very expressive with just sort of like little details, like just a look in the eyes or a gesture. And I don't want to sound like I'm just shitting all over him, because I truly think he's an extraordinary actor, and
he's great.
I mean, my God, The Revenant, Fury Road.
Oh, yeah.
He's just absolutely mesmerizing when he's at his best.
Did you know that he's going to be playing an exterminator in Nolan's next movie?
That would not surprise me.
The gas mask is just the biggest thing you've ever seen.
What kind of exterminator? Like getting rid of bugs or rodents?
It's both, and believe it or not, it's people, Ben. It's a double meaning. I know it's a little trashy for your beloved Nolan, but it's just what I've read. Deadline's reported it. You know it's true.
Is an exterminator?
So you've seen it. You've seen an early cut.
The trailer is super hot right now. It's trending.
There you go. Well, sir, thank you for joining us at the end of this series, and for
Oh no, thank you. This was super fun.
Chatting about a movie you're mixed negative on.
I really did enjoy much of it. I have no wrath to bring down upon it.
That's
promise.
Good. That's good. Thanks to everyone for riding with us to the end of the road here. But we're out of gas. We got to stop. And I'll find a new kick shortly. But Ben, thanks for hanging out, man. It's good to talk to you.
Oh, likewise. Thank you, Chance.